we're back to working on this mahogany secretary desk. I've been struggling with how to properly finish this off. So after the 3 coats of lacquer, I brought it down to the basement, let it really cure out, and then went about experimenting on how to polish the lacquer 2 times, and I had 2 failures. So I'm going to start out by telling you what not to do. First thing not to do is to not realize that you need to grain fill mahogany. And the result of that was that it was impossible for me to get a finish like I wanted. So that's point number 1. And the grain fill, probably best to do it after you stain it. And you can do that if you use a clear grain fill like this aqua coat. So that's one thing to do. So now, once I've made that mistake, how do I fix it? All right, and I've learned that the hard way here. But the way I'm going to fix it now is, remember, this already got some lacquer on it. I can't undo that unless I sand everything all the way back down to bare wood, and I'm not going to do that. So what I've experimented with and been satisfied with the results is to go ahead and sand the lacquer with a 220. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. We're just taking off the high spots here. And that provides us with a decent surface to put the aqua coat grain filler on it. And it's going to take 3 coats of this at least to where we're happy. And you have to sand between each coat of that we do. And I'm going to use 220, 240, somewhere in there, to sand it after each application of the aqua coat. After that's done, then we're going to respray with probably 3 coats of the spray lacquer. Then we can go ahead and do the polishing process that I've already used once on the polyurethane. I've been very happy with it, and I know it'll work. So that's what we're going to do. That's where we're at. So I have you up close and tight here, and I've sanded this with a 220, somewhere in the 220, 320 range. You can choose what you want to use. And, I'm ready to put some of the grain filler down. I do want to point out that when you're sanding, if you think there are places where maybe you just potentially went a little too deep, like as an example, maybe in here I started to get down into the stain. It's a little hard to tell, but that's possible. Maybe down here a little bit. I can see a little spot here. From now until we're done grain filling, I found you can touch up your stain, because we're going to put down more lacquer on top of this, and the grain filler is designed to either go before or after the stain. So, if you need to do touch-up work, you're going to have a chance to do it right up until you're ready to put down more lacquer. So anyways, let's go ahead and do some of this. What I've found in the past is the grain filler I've scraped up and put back in, and I do pick up some color. So that's all that is. That's just, from previous use of it. But basically, all you're doing is use like a credit card kind of a thing. And you're kind of working against the grain. And just trying to schmutz it in. And we are going to do 3 coats of this. I suspect this does shrink as it's drying. They tell you to work against the grain, so that's what I'm doing here. best I can. Probably too much. So then once we have the kind of schmutzed in, we'll just scrape along, going with the grain, picking up the excess as best we can. Try to save as much of my excess as I can because it seems like I have no problem using it. As long as I keep it from drying out. By the way, this stuff does dry very quickly, which is great. Because within, 30 minutes, I can be down here sanding this and putting another coat on already. Well, let's do a little update on the desk. I think I am happy with the grain filler at this point. Everything has been, got at least 3 coats on it. I know it looks really rough at this point, especially when you look at things like this, right? I mean, everything kind of looks visually pretty nasty, but when you feel it, what I'm looking for is, do I feel anything that feels grainy? And I really don't. I mean, it's dramatically improved as far as that goes. I mean, the worst board trim piece is this right here. This thing was A, banged up, and B, it was extremely grainy, as you can just tell by the way it looks from the sanding. But it feels dramatically better. It looks terrible, but that's to be expected. So, I mean, the drawers are, they were pretty grainy, but even though they look grainy, they don't feel it, when you just run your fingers over it. So, I use that touch test on everything to make sure I've got all the touch points the way I want them to feel. Because the next step now is to use a tack cloth, go over all this really good, and then I'm going to get out my stain and we'll go through and touch up the stain and get it looking decent. And then once that dries, we're ready to put some more lacquer on it. Well, there we go. I got it stained. Again, looks pretty good. So, next nice day I get, I'll get this outside where I can safely spray lacquer. And we'll try to get 3 coats of lacquer on everything. The 3 additional coats of lacquer on it. The sad thing is here, I never really was able to successfully polish this piece the way I was hoping to. I don't know if that was because I used lacquer on it or if it was because it was mahogany and there were still pores in it, but when I did try to polish it, I would get some residue stuck down in the finish. So I just kind of abandoned the effort on the polishing. The hardware was in pretty rough shape. I did actually boil the hardware in vinegar for about 15 minutes, and then I was able to use some triple knot steel wool on it and get most of the tarnish off of it. These photos just kind of show you before and after the polishing. And then of course, once we got it all put together, it actually looks really nice. So, you know, in spite of all my struggles, this thing worked out to be quite a showpiece. And, you know, it looks really good. So if you like our content, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot for spending some time with us.